I was one of a group that formed the society. A group of us had been discussing the plight of the native kind of honeybee in Scotland for several years, and we decided to try to raise the profile a bit and to do more. So we had some meetings, discussed how to set up the society, and then we went ahead and did it and called a first meeting. Had 100 plus people there, discussed what the society should be for, how we should do it, what people's needs are in different parts of Scotland, and then agreed who would be running it. So it ended up with me as chair. It's a SCIO, a Scottish Charitable Incorporated Organisation, which means it's an official charity. We registered it with the charity regulator in Scotland. So we have a formal structure and a constitution, and we have to send a report to the charity regulator annually on what we've been doing. We are all beekeepers, and we were all aware that it's quite hard to find pure examples of the original native Scottish honeybee. And we were also, we know, in fact, one of the group is a guy called by the name of Andrew Abrahams, who lives on the island of Colonsay. And in the 1980s, he was aware that it was getting quite difficult to find the original pure form of the honeybee. So he took the best examples he could find at the time onto the island of Colonsay and has been looking after them there ever since. So he spent a lot of energy trying to get official recognition for this as a reserve, and eventually the Scottish Government passed a regulation which acknowledged that the island of Colonsay is a reserve. But he's only one beekeeper with a certain number of colonies, so we wanted, and he's also, you know, we all get older over time, so we needed to do something to continue this. So the T are to try to help by trying to find good examples of the original native Scottish honeybee and to encourage people to look after them. And to build the colonies that we have access to so that we're in a better position to maybe try to repopulate certain areas with it, to preserve it for the longer term. The main issue with native honeybees is that there's quite a trade in other kinds of honeybee, and so anyone who wants to get into beekeeping and buys honeybees from the commercial sources to go to these sources, and they usually buy in their stocks from other countries. Also the bigger commercial beekeepers, and there are maybe 20 or so commercial beekeepers in Scotland, and of them maybe half a dozen are quite large, and one of them in particular is very large. They tend to keep the non-native kinds because they're more vigorous stocks, and they get higher honey yields if they feed them a lot. So we think they're not as well adapted for life in our windy, wet, cool climate, but they'll survive okay, and they do well if you feed them a lot. So the purpose of the society was to try to recover what's left here and there, and to do something about preserving it for the long term and making it useful to people again. Almost all honeybees in Scotland are looked after by beekeepers. There are still a few wild colonies, and so the wild colonies are of interest to us. But in the more populated parts of Scotland, the wild ones are really derived or have hybridized with bees that people have been keeping locally. There are a few parts where there might be the original bee living in the wild, but there's very, very few of them now for multiple reasons. So our main interest has been speaking to beekeepers to see what they have, to ask beekeepers if they have, does it look like the kind that we're interested in. So this year again, and was it 3 years ago, we are organising a survey where we're asking beekeepers across Scotland to cooperate, and if they think their bees are like the native kind, then they are sending us images, and we will, there's a group of 4 of us that are quite expert in identifying kinds of honeybee, and we look at these pictures, and if we think they're good, we'll ask them to send a sample of dead bees to us, and we'll look at them more so and get some DNA testing done. There's scientists at the Roslin Research Institute near Edinburgh, which they've recently developed a service so that we can get DNA testing done to understand the genetics of any sample. So it's mostly by asking beekeepers what they have, and then checking it. And then if there's a further stage to all of this, when we arrive at some that look quite good, we are then hoping that those beekeepers will cooperate with us by allowing us to raise new queens from what they have. So we can go into a hive and take a frame of bees and lift tiny larvae and put them into special cells that we put in another colony that doesn't have a queen, and we can get that colony to make a set of new queens for us, and then we can use these queens to head other colonies. The queen lays all the eggs, so if you put a new queen into a colony, then over about 6 weeks, when all of the worker bees die off because they get too old, they'll be replaced by the daughters of the new queen. Mm. So the queen controls the genetics of the colony. The big problem with this is that queen honeybees will fly quite far to mate, and also the drones, the male bees, also fly quite far. So often 2 or 3 or 4 kilometres, sometimes longer. So we must do this raising of queens in an area where there are no other beekeepers. And we also have to have enough of our own colonies producing the right kind of males so that the mating can take place. And then it takes place up in the air above tree height, in places that they find. The breeding of pure honeybees is quite a difficult thing. It means getting away from all other beekeepers into areas where there are none, and then being able to do it that way. So honeybees come in various colours. The ones which were native here in the UK and also the western part of Europe originally were a subspecies called Apis mellifera mellifera. In different countries they had different names. Some countries call them black bees, some call them brown bees, some call them dark bees. And those words are still used. But they describe the fact that the bees are usually dark brown. They don't have orange-coloured bands on their abdomen, and the hairs around them are also quite dark. In general, dark brown bees are the kind we're after, but there are some other kinds of honeybee that are also similar colour, and the hybrids are quite difficult to separate from the native kinds. So there's 5 traits that we look at really. The colour of the hair on the back of the thorax, the middle bit, whether or not it has any colour banding on the abdomen, whether so on the abdomen they have bands of hair. We call it tomentum. It's really short hair, so you see stripes on the abdomen. If those stripes are kind of pale brown and not too thick, then that's good for a native honeybee. If they're really quite thick or broad and paler, then that's not good. And the other thing is down at the tip of the tail, there are hairs over the body that stick up the way, and down towards the tip of the tail, the hairs on the native kinds are quite long. They're also a little bit chunkier, whereas some of the other bees are longer and thinner. So we like to say the Scottish bees are short and fat with hairy bums. We also check the wings. So pattern of the veins on the wings differs between insects, but also between different kinds of honeybee. So that's another check that we can do. All of those things together, we can have quite a good view of whether it's a reasonably pure native type. And the DNA test then confirms that or corrects it if we're wrong. This kind of honeybee has been lost from most European countries, but it's still quite strong in Ireland. So in Ireland, there's really quite a strong move to protect their native bee, which is it's from the same group as our own, and it's very similar. So apart from Ireland, this bee is at risk of being lost in the pure form. So we like to think of what we are trying to achieve as similar to Scottish wildcats, which are now also very, very rare and at risk of losing them completely. And again, it's due to hybridization with domesticated kinds that we think that, it's quite a good bee. There's no reason for people to switch to these other kinds of bees that people have been keeping. But the people involved in the society and in preserving them are all the way from small-scale hobby beekeepers up to people like me. I was a scientist until 6 years ago, and I'm now trying to make my income from bees. Which losing a type of bee completely that used to be here, that's something we need to try to stop. For me, it's a conservation aim, and it's a good thing to be trying to do. The losses that people have had of honeybees are very quickly replaced. You can divide colonies and replace them. A lot of the losses over the years have been diseases or beekeepers not looking after their stock very well. So for me, conserving honeybees as a whole in the UK is not particularly important because there's plenty of honeybees around. For me, the wild bees are in more difficulty, but even then, things are changing. I'm also very interested in wild bees. I know we have 260 species of wild bee in the UK. Some of these are very rare. Some of these are in trouble. Others are spreading. And you can see the effect of climate change because we have a lot of species of wild bee that are spreading north into Scotland and through Scotland that we didn't have before. So for me, that's where the big concerns are. In honeybees, it's losing types that are native here and will be lost if we don't do anything. Honeybees as a whole don't really need a lot of help because beekeepers look after them and propagate them, but wild bees are different. They have their own needs.